Assalamu alaikum and peace. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and you're watching Muslim Network TV. Muslim Network TV is on Galaxy 19 satellite, which covers the United States, north to south, east to west completely, and also most of Canada and all of Mexico. We're also streaming on OTT devices like Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and you can download our app. So watch it on your cell phone. Just look for Muslim Network TV. App is available on iPhone and Android, both platforms. Our website is muslimnetwork.tv. America, since the founding of Israel, wanted Arab countries to recognize Israel. It's happening now. It has happening for a while, a couple of countries, but now it seems several countries. The political landscape in terms of foreign policy is changing in the Middle East rapidly. What direction will it take next? Israeli agreement with some Arab states are celebrated by White House. Of course, President Trump has tweeted about it. That must be a big deal. Washington Post calls it a watershed moment. Consular and foreign relations are all beating the drum of extraordinary achievement of the Trump administration. Are Arabs aligning with Israel because America is withdrawing from the world? And what is behind it? Or is it the strategy of protection which UAE and Saudi Arabia are seeking vis-a-vis Iran? What will happen to the cause of freedom for Palestine? Is Israel being rewarded for not doing something which it should never have considered in the first place, like annexing most of West Bank? I mean, Palestine is hardly there. It is just cheddar cheese has, well, not a cheddar cheese, what is Swiss cheese has less hole, it seems, than Palestine at this moment. To discuss all of that and what is happening around that part of the world, we have two extraordinary guests. Professor Marvin Weinbaum, welcome to Muslim Network TV. Professor Weinbaum is Director of Afghanistan and Pakistan Studies at Middle East Institute, which is way beyond Middle East, but they are part of that discussion, including North Africa. He is Professor Emeritus of Political Science at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And with us also is Linda Sarsour. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam, brother.
Welcome to Muslim Network TV. Linda Sarsour is author, award-winning activist, is standing up for Black Lives Matter, where not many people from our communities are standing tall and demanding justice. And she is also former co-chair of the historic Women March, which took place more than 3 years ago. Well, Professor, tell me what is this agreement which UAE and Israel has?
Well, it certainly has shaken up politics in the regional relationships. But I think that this, of course, has been coming for a good deal of time. There have been informal contacts for some months and years, indeed. But this was a big step, certainly a big step to formalize this in the way in which they have, beginning with UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, although that seems a bit shaky at the moment, and the behind the role that Saudi Arabia seems to be assuming here. And the driver on all of this is Iran. I don't think we should in any way minimize that. At the same time, we have to be honest too in saying that these same countries, and I'll include Pakistan in that as well, have given only lip service much of the time to their feeling of concern about the Palestinian issue. They have, on the public side of things, raised it, but they've never done anything. And in fact, if one goes back a few years, Saudi Arabia had already taken the initiative in recognizing Israel on conditions having to do with Pakistan, but never really followed up on that. So I think we have to keep that in mind, that this was like the Kashmir, if we can use that as an example. Everybody has something to say about it, but nobody's really prepared to go down the line on that.
So what exactly this agreement is about, it is a formal recognition of Israel, opening diplomatic things, or it's normalizing relation. What does normalizing relations include? And even if you, Linda, do you have any idea what this normalization of relation?
What we're seeing is that it's being done cautiously. UAE does seem to be prepared to go further than the others in willingness here to make this visible to the public. But that's the big issue here. How much, given the years of what has been said about Israel and Palestinian issues, how can you now just simply turn around and say, well, that was all true, but there are bigger fish to fry right now. And so whatever we've said here, let's put that on the back burner. I think we can see this at two levels. One level is the elites to the elites. But I think you'll notice that Saudi Arabia never acknowledged, at least initially, that a meeting took place with Prime Minister Netanyahu, so that what was going on between the elites was proceeding at a rapid pace, but the public was spared this, and that's likely to be the modus operandi for some time.
Why did you say that Sudan is, sort of fishy? I mean, have they done this or not done this, and what is it what they have done?
I don't know the details on this, but I have learned that the Sudan agreement is fraying at the edges here. So I really don't want to go into that, except to say that that doesn't seem to be working out exactly along the lines of what has occurred with UAE and Bahrain.
Linda, what these countries are achieving through this?
I mean, these agreements that are happening right now between some of these Gulf nations and Israel is really about their own self-interest as nations. And it's all for their own personal benefit. It has absolutely nothing to do with trying to normalize relations with Israel towards some sort of peace process or towards some alleviation of oppression against the Palestinian people. And I want people to really understand that this is, as Marvin pointed out, is really elites with the elites, the people of Bahrain, the people of Sudan, the nations, they are not in agreement with their governments. And one of the things that's very outrageous about these kind of agreements is that they don't even put conditions on the table. I think if you are going to make relations with a nation state, that's fine. But there should have been some sort of conditions that says, in order for us to have, open economic policy or economic trade or whatever other things come with these types of agreements, there could have been something about ending the siege on Gaza, lifting the occupation on the Palestinian people. That could have actually shielded these Gulf nations from some of the criticism that they received really from across the world. And so it's as a Palestinian, it is very unfortunate to see this happening without any regard, without any consultation with the Palestinian people or the Palestinian leadership, which is very flawed. I will not defend the Palestinian leadership as being, the people that have, unequivocally defended the Palestinian people, but still there is leadership in Palestine that should be consulted about these agreements.
I mean, Marvin, it seems that this agreement didn't come as a surprise to you.
Repeat that, please.
It seems that you are not surprised by these agreements.
They being?
Did they have this type of ongoing relationship, which is just announced while they were already relating on different areas?
I'm saying at certain levels, they were already uniting. Look, as I said before, the driver in all this is Iran. That has taken priority over everything else. And for Saudi Arabia, of course, has been that for the longest time in the Gulf countries. On that, they are solidly on the same side of as Israel is. And so that is powerful enough to be the driver here in bringing them together. And that will override anything else that might be conditioning this. And I think that's the reality here. And it does mean here that they're going to be coordinating in I think to a great degree on their policy towards Iran. They're having, and I know you want to get to this later, they're having Donald Trump in the presidency was a very important part of this. What Biden will do now, particularly since he's certainly associated with at least exploring now a more diplomatic approach toward Iran, how that will affect this. There was and we can talk about the preemptive attack here, which killed the leading Iranian scientist. This was certainly undertaken. I'm going to ask my wife.
Okay, sure. So, Linda, do you think Saudi Arabia is going to go on the same path?
I think Saudi Arabia historically has tried to play both sides. They want their cake and eat it too. And so I think that they're a bit more strategic about the ways in which they undergo these agreements and these meetings. As you can see from the UAE, they were absolutely unapologetic about their public declaration of relations with Israel. And it was a very public manner. And as Marvin said, I do truly believe that Saudi Arabia has a very heavy hand in what is happening in that region of the world. But again, also want their cake and eat it too. So you don't see them in the same public declaration as you see a country like UAE. So I would say that Saudi Arabia is central to what is happening. And as Marvin has said, I mean, they have played lip service to the Palestinian people for a very long time, just as many of these Gulf nations have. There has been some resources that have went to Gaza and others, in forms of charity and donations. But overall, the political power that these Gulf nations amass and have, they can have influence on the state of Israel, specifically when it comes to alleviating some of the oppression on the Palestinian people. But for some reason, and there are many reasons that Marvin kind of alluded to, they have not used that type of political power that they have and influence that they have to help the Palestinian people in any transformative way.
So is it going to, these countries who are recognizing, other than Sudan, do not have a democratically elected governments? I mean, these are kingdom or sheikdoms or little here and little there. And a good number of their population is actually non-citizens who are working from other countries, who are oppressed on their own terms because they are poor. They continue to work in those places. So do you think, the reports, public opinion reports are saying that 80 to 89% of different populace of these countries who have been surveyed do not agree with this agreement. So do you think there is a chance, Linda, that the Gulf, in the Persian Gulf, between these dictators or kingdoms and their people is going to expand, and there may be more restlessness among the masses?
I mean, Imam Malik, you know this very well. Unfortunately, these nation states that you are talking about, including the UAE and Bahrain, have been heavy-handed against protesters on any issue, not just folks rising up in solidarity with the Palestinian people, but demanding human rights, demanding the protection of protesters. So I feel very much concerned that if there were to be any, uprisings, that the people would be, there'll be crackdowns on the people. There are people who've been tortured in these prisons. There are people who have been even disappeared, some who have been brutalized. And so I don't know if we're going to see uprisings, because people understand the consequences of standing up for justice for Palestinians or any other form of justice in these nations. We've seen that over the last few years in light of some of the moments around the Arab Spring. And I don't foresee it coming. I think the people are tired. I think the Arab world is tired. And they say they're watching what's happening in Yemen. They have seen the destruction of Syria. And they've seen we went from a revolution in Egypt to a coup. And a country right now that's also imprisoning protesters and also torturing protesters. So we are in a very sad state of affairs in the Arab world right now. So as a Palestinian, I feel sad to say this, but I don't really see that those who I know do not agree with the decisions that their governments are making are going to be going to the streets in the millions. I just don't see it happening.
In Pakistan,
Marvin, you're muted, Marvin. Unmute yourself.
I'm on.
Yeah, there you go. We see more.
Marvin, let me ask.
I just want to add.
Go ahead.
I just want to add the only country where you might get crowds in the street on this is Iran.
Absolutely. Iran. Yeah, I mean, Iran doesn't count for me as part of those UAE group, but absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we will take a short break. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and I'm talking with Professor Marvin Weinbaum and Linda Sarsour, and we'll be right back after these messages.
My wife, she's a professor at the University of Cincinnati, who's Catholic, and by her watching and listening to our 3-year-old son watch Adam's World, she ended up taking Kalima Shahada. She embraced Islam because she learned so much about Islam and the other prophets. It really affected our life in a great way, and because of Sound Vision and Adam's World, we're Muslims.
I took my Shahada 15 years ago, and I actually am from a rural part of Ohio. And so I found the catalog for Sound Vision, and I ordered the tapes and the CDs and the books, and I used those, and especially for my little daughter, that's how we basically learned our Islam, and Islam entered our hearts through the wonderful works of Sound Vision.
Okay, assalamu alaikum, brother. I just want you to know that I love the Sound Vision website, that a lot of times when I'm looking for information, especially as it relates to homelessness, domestic violence, and women issues, I go to that website, and then I see what you've written, and then I copy and paste it and spread the word, because the wisdom is there. So I can't do any better than what Sound Vision has already done.
Sound Vision is our survival guide. It is the organization that provides skills for Muslims how to survive and thrive in this community here in the U.S.
Assalamu alaikum, my name is Anam, I'm in 11th grade, and I grew up with Adam's World, and what it taught me was unity, respect, and love for the Muslim Ummah.
Adam's World is the greatest show ever made. Take me to the Kaaba, man. I love that puppet.
Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and I'm talking with Marvin Weinbaum and Linda Sarsour. Very, very sad to hear, Linda, that they're bold enough to tell the public opinion survey people, and they have surveyed about 30,000 people one-on-one on the telephone, that they disagree with that. I mean, 80 to 89% of people, depending which country in the Gulf you're talking about. But they're sick and tired of uprisings which are not taking them anywhere. And they're the people who are rising up for democracy. All they were looking for, a peaceful election and all that, and they're being oppressed. Now, America has always stood with those people who have been oppressing, providing material. So people turn against America because they are supporting the dictators and the kings and the like of those. Do you think now the Israel, instead of America, will be providing all those technologies to target dissidents and get hold of them and punish them? I mean, Israel was known on injecting chemicals in the body of Palestinian in Jordan and other countries. So they have mastered some special technologies. Do you think UAE and Bahrain now will use those technologies to oppress people?
They have already, Imam Malik, in the past. I had watched many times over the course of the last maybe 8 or 9 years, protesters, particularly Muslim women, who have been imprisoned in places like Bahrain, have been tortured, have been surveilled, have been followed. And so this is actually a reality. It's not even just paranoia of what happens to people in particularly under dictatorships and regimes that make the decision to stand up and be bold and be visible and be in the street and also lead other people. So I have a lot of empathy and sympathy with people who do understand that there's an injustice, do understand that their governments do not align with the will of the people, but also understand that standing up against that will cause some consequences that I think are very detrimental, and also that we don't have control over. We do not have control over the Bahraini government to ask them to, release protesters. You have watched in Egypt, Imam Malik, even Americans who are Egyptians who have lingered in Egyptian prisons. And so it is a very hard situation for them to be in this moment. So I empathize with them. And I am very proud of those who decide, regardless of the consequences, to stand up in their nation states for justice, for whether it be for the Palestinian people or just justice for the people of those nations in general, because they too, in the country of Bahrain, when the ways in which women and also workers who are from other countries are treated, and just the type of crackdown that has happened there, the fact that there are people who are still second and third class citizens in these nations, do deserve justice that they have not received.
Marvin, you being expert of Pakistan, whether there is a military or elections, I mean, for a while there has been electoral processes. People have been, free to protest and things like that. Do you think the type of pressure which Saudi Arabia and UAE are exerting on Pakistan, but Pakistani population, of course, probably have similar opinion than the other countries. Do you think Pakistani government at this moment will dare to take this step?
I think it's very clear that Imran Khan's government is not going to in any way lend itself to the idea that it's prepared to normalize relations with Israel. They've got too much else on their plate anyway. Right now, they're just struggling here domestically to stay on top, to find a relationship with the military that will keep them in power. So it's very much a side issue. I don't think that Saudi Arabia is going to press it. It's not going to say we're going to break relations if you don't, but nothing like that. So I just think that the countries of the Gulf now that have taken this action are or about to take it or may take it would like to have Pakistan. After all, Pakistan is population-wise the largest country by far in the region. To have 220 million Muslims as close on is very important. No, that's not going to happen. There were overtures for recognition going back, actually to the to General Musharraf's time. Mm-hmm. There were serious discussion. I say serious in that at one point, then the president, General Musharraf, had said, let's have open discussion on this issue. That didn't last very long. I think the public pressure was such that although there were a few columns in English language newspapers, that was shut down pretty quickly. So that's not going to happen. But you can, if he wanted to make an issue of this, and he wanted to stand up tall for the Palestinian people, he or any number of the religious-oriented groups that protest just about everything else could very well get a very large turnout for demonstrations. But they're not doing that. As I say, they've got other fights on their hands. And so this is not going to be a priority issue. Palestine has never been a priority issue except at this level of rhetoric in Pakistan.
Who are the countries, Linda, in the world, Muslim or not Muslim country, majority countries, who are standing with Palestinians firmly?
That's a great question, Imam Malik. I think it kind of changed over the years, and especially with changes of different regimes. And also when we define what help is, I think help, it could be in different ways of support is sometimes financial and financial resources to the Palestinian people. Oftentimes it's, political pressure on the state of Israel. The countries that have been in solidarity with the Palestinian people have been many of the North African nations, including Algeria, and also making the distinction between the peoples and the nation states. Like I know, for example, from traveling around North Africa, knowing that like everywhere you go in a place like Algeria, for example, or even in Morocco, there's a lot of solidarity with the Palestinian people. And as you know, from the time of, and people can have their criticisms of Muammar Gaddafi for sure, and I understand that there are many criticisms of his leadership, but he was in unequivocal solidarity with the Palestinian people. People, of course, this from the times of Iraq being in solidarity with the Palestinian people, but unfortunately, over the last 20 years, as you know, we have literally decimated the country of Iraq. The solidarity, Imam Malik, is all over the world. Really, it is amongst the people. The majority of the actual people of the nation states are in solidarity. The issue is that oftentimes many of the governments are afraid of retribution for standing in solidarity with the Palestinian people. They are afraid of their relationships with the United States government because of their unequivocal support of the state of Israel. So they are afraid of their standing. I mean, we've seen many nation states in the United Nations recently, as you saw, there was a vote in favor of the Palestinian people in the UN, and pretty much every nation voted for it, except for Israel and except for the United States and some countries that I'm not going to say are irrelevant, but are quite irrelevant in the political sphere, like Guam and, some nations that I'm not very familiar with, some islands and things like that. So that the solidarity is there. The issue is the actual fundamental unity to stand and put pressure on the state of Israel, maybe in the forms of economic boycotts or in forms of breaking economic trade relations or things like that, would be very immensely helpful to the Palestinian people. But really, none of those nation states in recent times have really went that far. And I think Iran continues to be the biggest threat to the state of Israel and in that region. And so that is why you see a lot of the kind of poking and probing and the recent assassination of the top scientist in Iran, which I think is something that I still don't understand what the ramifications of that are going to be. But it sounds to me, Professor Marvin, as someone who's not an expert in foreign policy, a very dangerous situation that we found ourselves in, after the assassination of their top military leader. And now we're in the phase of the assassination of their top nuclear scientist. I would say that we are now in a very dangerous situation.
Let's continue to talk about that little bit in a minute. But one of the things which I was surprised to see, Marvin, which is being said by several people, it is the Palestinian who continue to refuse any agreement with Israelis. Otherwise, there would have been an agreement. What do you think about that?
Well, look, it's a Palestinian issue, which obviously has always been the rub here. I don't think there's any question about that. But nations pursue ultimately their own self-interest, and they in their rhetoric may suggest otherwise. So I think that's what we have here. Linda, I think you would also agree here that the difficulties politically within Palestine, among people in Palestine, has played into this too. The disunity there, the struggles that are going on there. It has not been, let me put it this way, had there been a unified leadership and figures like Arafat, who for whatever else he stood for, was able to very much unite people. The lack of that for these decades now has really weakened the Palestinian appeal here, and made it obviously easier for Israel to be able to do pretty much what it wanted to do and to manipulate the situation. So I don't think we can overlook that.
You're watching Muslim Network TV, and we're talking about shifting foreign policies in the Middle East. And we have Professor Marvin Weinbaum and Linda Sarsour with us. When we come back, we'll talk about what difference Biden administration will make and the variable of Iran in the Middle Eastern politics. Stay with us. We'll be right back after these messages.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's your brother Zain Bika from South Africa. One of the first educational programs ever produced for Muslim children was the ever popular Adam's World series. The colorful and comical Muslim puppets stole the heart of a generation. Sound Vision will be releasing brand new episodes of Adam's World with the launch of a Adam's World app. Subscribers will enjoy new Adam's World episodes as they are released, as well as all the classic episodes of Adam's World. So visit adamsworldapp.com now to learn more, subscribe, and enjoy new adventures of Adam and his friends. And let's keep helping tomorrow's Muslims today. Assalamu alaikum.
Adam's World. Believe me, there's a lot to see. Bismillah. Let's explore.
Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and I'm with Professor Weinbaum and Linda Sarsour. Okay, so Biden administration, everybody is waiting for it, except President Trump, perhaps. What in the world is he going to do? Will he have enough time dealing with anything in the world except what is left behind?
This is a hard conversation that I've been having, Imam Malik, about looking at this administration and then also trying to assess and analyze some of the appointments, specifically those who are kind of in the State Department, the UN envoys, and not really necessarily feeling like, we're going into a much different direction. I absolutely think there's more progress than Trump, for sure. I think, Linda Thomas Greenfield as U.S. envoy, I think she's going to be more engaged, part of an engagement process. I mean, Tony Blinken, as you know, is the Secretary of State. I mean, many of us know him from the past. He is very unequivocally pro-Israel. And so I'm not sure that our approach to the state of Israel is going to be that much different than it has in the past. So on the foreign policy level, I am not overly optimistic. I think that the administration will try to go into more diplomatic relations, or at least dialogue with Iran. I don't think that the Biden administration wants a war with Iran. I think, in fact, that they want to keep as far away from possible from a war with Iran. But overall, I don't see generally a different a foreign policy. I think that there is much more opportunity for us to work on a domestic level and work towards some progressive domestic policies than I do have hope in a foreign policy under this administration. Just knowing the history of Biden under the Obama administration and just knowing his particular views on Israel and his relationships, I don't know. I just don't see it. I think Professor Marvin might have a better analysis because of his long track record of work. But for me personally, I don't feel that optimistic.
Professor Marvin, America is consistently in support of Israel. There's no question about that. But America as a whole, people have felt was withdrawing from the world even during the Obama era. He refused to interfere in many of the things, including like he drew a line in Syria if you use the chemical weapons, and then he didn't do. So in Middle East, withdrawal from the world arena didn't begin with Trump, but it was during the President Obama as well. And President Trump in some ways strengthened that, and people couldn't figure out. Do you think while Biden will join, the Paris Accord and things like that, is America, because of the domestic reasons or whatever other challenges, will be less involved in the Middle East, which will give more room to Israel and Iran to play their cards?
I don't think necessarily that the U.S. is going to become less involved, because it's made it very clear, and it's anybody who's followed the policies that Biden and Blinken, for that matter, have advocated, know that the emphasis here is going to be on rebuilding alliances. Now, that doesn't refer to Israel, obviously. If anything, clearly, Netanyahu was not wrong in supporting, as far as his interests were concerned, supporting the Trump administration. He got from the Trump administration concessions that the Democratic regime would never have given. And of course, the relocation of the embassy was just one of those. But what is going on now at this very moment is the green light that has been given to further development in the West Bank. These have been standard no-nos for the Democratic administration over all these many years. And it's going to be very difficult for the Biden administration to backtrack on all of those. No, the embassy is not going back to Tel Aviv. That's pretty clear. But at least there will not be the cheering on of the of the settlers here, and the general encouragement here for them to further encroach in the West Bank. So I don't think that it's going to be exactly the same. And again, I put the emphasis here on alliance building, and that means that the Middle East is not going to go away, no more than ultimately Afghanistan and Pakistan are going to go away now. The world is far too integrated now. And now that we have issues like global terrorism and nuclear proliferation very much being at the forefront, America first here is not going to work. And so, no, I don't see a recession here from engagement in the Middle East. But as far as Iran is concerned, that's going to be very difficult to go back to where the Obama administration was. I don't think it's going to be politically feasible for this new administration that's coming in to be able to simply say, let's just pretend that the Trump years never existed and let's go back to that. No, Iran's own activities, and as Tom Friedman pointed out in a column in the New York Times just the other day, the fact that now Iran has precision-guided missiles, and those were used in the attack on the Saudi oil fields or oil production facilities not that long ago. That could be a game changer here. The Israelis have already presumably shared some of this technology and hardware with friends in Lebanon and elsewhere, and so that changes the equation a great deal, and it means that a Biden administration in negotiating now with Iran cannot ignore that. It's got to build that some lid on that into any agreement, any diplomatic agreement. It's not going to be a return to the Obama administration as far as diplomacy is concerned.
So there are two things vis-a-vis Iran. One, Iran's capacity to attack and its support for Iraqi and Syrian regimes, as well as support in Yemen and in some proxies, other areas. On the other side, there are attacks on Iran, Iranian, sort of what Iranian ambassador to our network described on interview. The commander of their sort of, worldwide operation was murdered, and now their top scientist is murdered. Neither of those is claimed by, so Iran didn't claim it attacked the Saudi oil fields. Israel does not claim that it killed the Iranian leaders. So what are the proofs that these things are done by these people?
Linda, why don't you tackle that?
Linda has independent intelligence service, so why don't you tell us?
Listen, I think that people piece things together. I think, people are watching they're analyzing all the different kind of affairs that have been happening over time, and 1 + 1 = 2. And I think that's how it's kind of being put out. I don't have any proof of anything. It just seems pretty clear to me. I think any intelligent person could understand why it would be in the interest of the state of Israel, for example, to eliminate the top nuclear scientist in Iran. I also do understand that it makes sense for someone to come to the conclusion that the Iranians are the ones that hit the Saudi oil fields. I mean, it's everything that's been playing out. It just seems clear. But to your point, Imam Malik, I personally don't have any proof of that. Marvin probably has a better analysis as an expert in this area. But
absolutely right.
As the young people say, that's the word on the street, Imam Malik, and that's kind
of the word on the streets. Okay.
That's the narrative that has been picked up both by some media outlets and analysts and other experts, just on those particular.
So Marvin, this is one place in America where word on the street and the word in the think tank seems to align itself. So tell me, so both things are going to be part of Biden administration's headache to discuss, and part of Iran attacking others, and is America in a position to stop Israel in any way in these type of extrajudicial and extra, I mean, what type of international law govern these things?
Imam Malik, I think we have to recognize that the United States has put restraints on Israel. Israel very likely would have carried out a number of different actions over recent years if the United States had been willing to sign on. So it's not that the U.S. does not have influence on Israel and what they do. This latest was clearly intended to limit the options that the incoming administration had. It's been very successful in doing that. But there are any times, again, I don't have any proof on this by any means, but times when Israel might have taken a more aggressive position than it has on Iran, including military operations, as against the kind of assassinations which are of a different order than a actual use of missiles or planes against Iranian targets. So I think we have to recognize that, and those restraints, such as they are, will continue to be there. For this reason alone, whatever Israel does, the United States is going to be credited with. And so you don't want to be the tail on the dog here. And so that's the main reason the United States has been very cautious in what it is willing to approve, because it's going to take, like it or not, whether it's involved in any way or not, is going to have responsibility thrown on it.
So Iran, when US killed one of its commanders, it retaliated to a United States base, and President Trump said that, well, it didn't do anything except cause little headache. Do you think the current killing of the Israeli scientist, Iran in its time, is going to retaliate against the United States or against Israel?
They have already reacted in that they have made a number of taken a number of actions here in boosting their nuclear program, and they've been public on it, and they have threatened to keep the international inspectors out. They are increasing the level of their refinement of fissionable material. This has been the kind of response. Politically, they've got to do something, but I suspect for the moment this is the sort of action we'll see. They don't want to, play into the hands of the Israelis now by taking military action, which then will necessarily bring the United States in. What Iran wants above all is a relaxation of the sanctions. This is has to keep in mind, this is what their objective has to be. Those sanctions have grievously hurt the Iranian people.
Mm-hmm.
And so
is there a track record of or any evidence that Iran has ever retaliated against Israel?
Directly against Israel?
Yes.
No, it hasn't, because this would give Israel just the excuse they want to argue that we have no choice but to respond in a maximalist way.
Let's talk the United States. We talked about people's opinion in the world. What is people's opinion in America about giving Palestinian right of self-determination and their own state? What is the public opinion about that? Does public opinion going to have any influence? You mentioned, Linda, that the appointments he has made, none of them may care for the opinion of Palestinian. But what is the public opinion in America, where America stands in terms of understanding the Palestinian rights for life?
I think that even with the appointments who don't have necessarily a great foreign policy track record when it comes to Israel-Palestine, but the rhetoric is definitely there. This idea of, we support two-state solution. We don't support the settlements. We will not, cheer on, nor will we support the expansion of settlements. The rhetoric that has been pretty clear against the Netanyahu type governance. So they have, the rhetoric is there. So I think that's going to be what is a bit different than, of course, under the Trump administration. The American people overall, and just really as part of the larger movements that I'm a part of, it's been really transformative over the last 15 years to see the call for Palestinian justice, the Palestinian liberation amongst young Latino, young Black, young progressive Jews has really become a rallying cry. This generation that I'm a part of truly believes that the cause for Palestine is this modern day ending of South African apartheid. They see this as their generation's global justice cause. And it's very inspiring to see that it's actually manifesting in politics. So when we look at the election of, for example, Ilhan and Rashida, then we look at the election of Jamal Bowman in New York, who, as you saw, defeated Representative Elliot Engel, who was a very staunch pro-Israel, very powerful member of Congress. And he was defeated by Jamal Bowman, who was a young African-American principal of a high school in New York. And so watching these very transformative elections, when we look at Cori Bush defeated a 50-year dynasty in St. Louis. She defeated Lacey Clay, who was an African-American, but also a very staunch supporter of Israel, someone who took a lot of money over the years from groups like AIPAC, has went to AIPAC events and has been very unequivocal publicly about his support for the state of Israel, unequivocal regardless of their oppression of the Palestinian people. And then here comes a young Ferguson protester, a nurse, a single mom, who is staunchly a supporter of the Palestinian people and who also happens to support the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. So it's no longer just a manifestation of the progressive movement and the rhetoric and the words coming out of the movement, but it's actually manifesting into political power. We have much more work to do to gain more support amongst those in power and with influence, but we're watching Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Pramila Jayapal, Mark Pecan. We're watching people like Betty McCollum from Minnesota, who has put forth a bill that has really put some elected officials up against the wall that basically says, look, taxpayer dollars should not go to the detainment of Palestinian children. Our taxpayer dollars should not be a part of this. And so getting people to support that bill has been really transformative to watch in my lifetime. So I know that there's a lot of more work to do, but I truly do believe that the Palestinian people do have the support of the American public that says Palestinian people are human beings. They deserve rights. They deserve the right to travel, the right to education, the right to clean water. And I feel very hopeful living in this time right now.
Professor Weinbaum, you're in a think tank and probably you interact with other think tanks. Does anybody in think tanks care for Palestine and Palestinian rights?
Oh, yes. The Middle East Institute has a Palestinian who follows, who writes. Yeah, no. In fact, the criticism is usually the other way around. Those who say that that there's been a tilting toward Palestinian issues. But even so, our person at the Institute who handles this is a very balanced person, and he's handled this very, very carefully and with conviction. I don't mean to say out of convenience. What the Middle East Institute is particularly interested in is not being an advocacy organization. We have different views, and we can live with that. There are many of the think tanks in Washington are funded heavily by different donors and have to pay homage to those donors. Now, we do get some support from Middle East countries, we do. But we stood up when the Khashoggi incident, we put at risk our relationship with Saudi Arabia and paid for it because we were not going to stand by and let this happen. Let me just one thing more. As we look at the American public opinion, and politically the strength of different groups, the evangelical community in the United States is the bedrock support here for Israel.
Absolutely.
Far more than the Jewish community.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's because for them it's a theological issue, and it's really quite amazing here because this is a community here which has also been very much associated with anti-Semitism.
Absolutely.
So it's ironic here.
That is another big topic which we will reconvene to talk about it. Well, thank you so much, Marvin Weinbaum. Thank you so much. And thank you, Linda Sarsour, both of your time for talking with us. And thank you, Sherdil Khan and Dr. Abdul Wahid for producing today's show. You're watching Muslim Network TV. We cover whole North America through satellite by airing live. We also stream on OTT devices like Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, Roku TV, and you can download our app, Muslim Network TV, on your phone. Our website is muslimnetwork.tv. And stay tuned. Keep watching for another good program. Peace. Salam.